What's up, YouTube? This is Megan. Welcome back to my channel, to all of my returning subscribers. However, if this is your first time joining me on today, welcome. Here we use information from celestial bodies to help us gain a better understanding of our favorite celebrities, world events, but most importantly, our damn selves. So come on in, subscribe to become a part of the family, and have a seat, okay? And right off bat, I do want to apologize for any background noise you might hear. They're doing some yard work outside. Just bear with the kid, all right? So today I am going to be doing a continuation of my aspect advice series. In the last video, I discussed the effects of Venus and Neptune. And then in this video, I will be discussing the effects of Venus and Pluto, specifically within the scope of like the harsher aspects, the oppositions, the squares, even the conjunction to a certain extent, because conjunctions can play out negatively or positively. But the reason that I am sticking to these particular aspects is because they are designed to occupy more of our attention, of our awareness, and for them to have a stronger impact on our lives a lot of times, because they can manifest in nagging, ongoing problems. Well, that would be more of the quincunx, but different video for a different day. But a square is an ongoing problem. It's an issue that forces you to change, like it's do or die, right? And then oppositions, in my opinion, are arguably worse because they could deal with extremes, outside events, faded events, and so on and so forth. So these tend to be the aspects that people are going to be a lot more aware of, and therefore would probably benefit most from in terms of advice. So to those of y'all who've been doing the requests, I've been getting a lot of requests on Venus, Pluto. So here you go. I hope y'all enjoy. Let's get started. So first off, Venus deals with our attraction levels, what we like, what we don't like, our relationships, platonic and romantic as well. It could deal with the things or the people we find beauty in, our ideals to a certain extent, definitely what we value, our own personal sense of self-worth, so on and so forth. And anytime that comes close to Pluto, or especially in this situation, opposes, squares, or even forms a conjunction of Pluto, managing healthy relationships and holding on to peace and security, having secure experiences are going to be very difficult. Very difficult, because a lot of times there's always going to be, these are people who live their lives in crisis mode, because there's always something playing in the backdrop in regards to like an issue. And a lot of times this is because Pluto, just as a planet, of course, is meant to help you evolve. But when it squares Venus, or if it opposes Venus, that evolution a lot of time is going to be, especially in opposition, initiated by change, very much outside of yourself, violent. It will drag you kicking and screaming, and can show up in your relationships with other people as just like very like tumultuous, even toxic dynamics. It could pull a lot out of you, and it could be for the better, or it could be for the worse. But usually if we're talking about squares and oppositions, it's for the worse. And you may find that you as a person bring these same kind of reactions out of other people. So it could just be really challenging. Very, very challenging. However, I do have some tips on how to like mitigate this and save yourself a lot of time, energy, and trouble. The first one being, be leery of anyone who works overtime in efforts to figure you out. And then the flip side of this energy would be, just be mindful of doing that to other people, and stay away from people where you have to work overtime in order to figure out who the hell they are and what they got going on. Because a lot of times, and this is due to Pluto and its direct correlation with those very heavy emotions such as suspicion, in some cases paranoia, but also, Pluto deals with power. So a lot of cases, this tactic, it's a power tactic, right? It's a power play. It's so that each person can kind of have like the upper hand on the situation. So if you are somebody who does this, it's usually to control people. It could be used to manipulate people. It's all right. I don't judge. I won't judge you. You know what I'm saying? But just know who you are. And then vice versa. You got to expect that a lot of the people that you meet, just real deal, are doing this to you. And some good ways to like be able to tell is, of course, when you're getting to know anybody on any type of level, friendship, romantic wise, anything, there is this kind of ebb and flow, or this kind of like progression of sharing intimacy and things like that. But you know when a person is really trying to figure out what makes you tick, and a lot of times that where they can have like ulterior motives, because these are people who are super invested in like understanding certain things about you, even if the depth of y'all relationship, the current depth of y'all relationship doesn't reflect that. Like, we is not even locked in like that. Like, you know what I'm saying? Now, with Pluto, Venus contact, you can find yourself in relationships where you locked in with a person. But once again, doing it too fast, okay, could ensure that, it could be a red flag. The other person could have so many different reasons why they're trying to do this. And honestly, to me, it's just a sign that they're trying to, once again, understand more of who you are, get you figured out so that they can come up with their game plan and fine tune their approach on how they want to engage with you. So revealing certain things about yourself, or just allowing somebody to have a certain position of power over you, in obvious ways, like even when it comes to money, because Venus does deal with finance. I see a lot of Venus Pluto individuals where, having joint accounts with their partner, joint accounts with their spouse. Of course, take this with a grain of salt, because, other aspects and factors will have to apply within the natal chart. But this could be a very strong indication of like, if, worst comes to worst, your partners could manipulate you or use financial abuse to try to get you to do what they want you to do. Or if y'all divorce, these aspects could be indicative of, I'm going to sue you for spousal support. You know what I mean? Not always, but just be mindful of the leverage you allow people to have over you. And once again, just how much and how fast you give to other people in terms of allowing them to understand just what makes you tick and where you are at every step of the way in life. A lot of people can use that to their own benefit. And if you are somebody who does that, like I said, stay away from people who make you feel like you have to do that. Because actually, this leads me to my second piece of advice, which is trust your gut, trust your instinct. So if you feel like you have to be on defense mode with somebody, it's usually for a good reason, because Pluto can attract a lot of the lower level experiences, or just, some of the most toxic and taboo experiences in life. And a lot of those taboo experiences could revolve around themes of like rape, murder. Oh my God, this video is not getting monetized. But, those are extreme circumstances, but Pluto deals with extremes. And a lot of times, Venus Pluto individuals are magnets for psychos and abusers and, people who are capable of almost anything. And that ties back to this tendency of engaging in relationships where y'all can invoke some of the worst out of one another. You can bring the worst out of people, and people can bring the worst out of you. And extremes and crises are bound to happen, especially with the opposition. That Venus in opposition to Pluto could deal with you just minding your business, living life, and you stumble across the wrong motherfucker, and that relationship turns you every which way except loose. Or, where this person just comes along and just completely just takes over your life, your experience, or where somebody could actively, target you for whatever reason. And of course, Pluto could also even be associated with like stalking. I've had a lot of clients with who had to go get restraining orders, because they had Venus Pluto aspects. And once again, These are all extreme case scenarios, but Pluto does deal with extremes. And before you even get to that point, there are almost always signs. Venus-Pluto people can be very intuitive, especially if you have the conjunction. And, it's a feeling that you feel in your gut. When somebody arouses that Venus-Pluto suspicion and those gut feelings, especially if you're somebody who has like Pluto aspect in the moon too, or, moon in Scorpio, just leave. Just trust your instincts, trust your gut, and about face. Which leads me to my third tip, my third piece of advice for Venus-Pluto aspects, specifically the harsh ones, would be to let go before your ass either gets drugged or really before you end up hating them. Now, because Pluto is, it rules Scorpio, it's the co-ruler for Scorpio. And I don't know if you guys are into tarot, but the tarot association of this energy would be like the Tower card. And whenever I'm talking Venus-Pluto, I'm dealing with somebody with Venus-Pluto contact, their relationships can kind of take or reflect that quality of everything that is the Tower card. So, life-changing events, life-death scenarios, do-die scenarios, extremes. And a lot of times these extremities tend to come about because the person in question has failed to really do what they needed to do to ensure that they're able to kind of stabilize themselves or properly address a particular problem or an issue, right? Keeping things in your life for too long to the point where outside intervention has to happen. And this is more so usually, I see this with the oppositions real bad, Venus in opposition to Pluto, where something could just happen and now you have to, it hurts worse than it would had you initially dealt with the problem. And so honestly, this could play out in terms of, going back and forth with the person, having an on again, off again situation, because Pluto can also be very binding. And in that same vein of death and rebirth and, going through all of these like life cycles, the highs and the lows, it can make a person bound and attached to another human being. And it actually has a lot of like codependent vibes going on with it. But what happens is these people keep doing the, breakup, makeup, death, rebirth. They got to regenerate and go back for another round, another cycle, until something, very much something, an outside force or, some kind of huge tower moment arises. And then next thing you know, you all fucked up out here. That could be the difference between a partner fucking around and finally killing your ass after y'all get into the, next blowout. Or I've seen situations where, even the death of a partner could happen, the death of a friend. And that could be, that outside intervention that removes that person from your life or changes the dynamic of the relationship altogether. So, and I mean, a lot of Venus-Pluto people could encounter, for a lot of women, a lot of these women could be widowers or however you say it, or having lost a partner or a friend or whatever the case may be, or had a situation where somebody tried to take them out, or like I said, just a major tower moment that just kind of ends and deads the situation altogether for once and for all. And usually that is literally like the worst thing. That could be something that changes the dynamic of the relationship, which could be like love, hate, but it could take the hate off the scale. That type of hate that could drive, once again, a love crime and then like a passion crime, or, it could just take people off the deep end. Or it could just make you walk around with a strong hate for that person, or have that person hate you. So once again, this could be taking the ex back over and over again, and allowing a lot of those feelings and that resentment, which is also very Pluto, to brood over until you just are fucking disgusted with them. And Pluto also deals with avoidance. So a lot of times, once again, if people don't address the issue, if there are a lot of things that you avoid about what bothers you in relationships, it will also kind of create that pressure point that, where everything just snaps and collapses. And now, once again, you got a crisis on your hands, which brings me to my next piece of advice. Set your standards and stand on them. Okay, Venus, once again, deals with standards. And a lot of times, Venus-Pluto people can compromise on those things, especially if they feel like their needs are being met, like financially or something. But like they're willing to kind of like compromise on those values. Don't. My next piece of advice for Venus-Pluto individuals is that sex will not fill the void. Oftentimes, Venus-Pluto individuals can be very promiscuous from a very early age, and a lot of times it can stem from feelings of or like a lack of self-worth, or where they could have issues with their self-esteem. Hence the, Venus dealing with our literal, like the way we appraise and assign value to ourselves. There could be something very like corrupt or afflicted about it, especially if these are trauma victims. But you don't necessarily have to be a trauma victim in order to have that issue. Y'all know I'm not a doctor. I ain't a psychologist, but you get what I'm getting at, right? But a lot of times, or an approach that I see a lot of Venus-Pluto individuals take on, unless, once again, other factors kind of, dominate or overcome these expressions, would be like to turn to sex and to be like very hypersexual in their relationships with people. It could even like give them a rush, or, give them a thrill. It's how they like really what they feel like they're worth in some cases, and there's nothing wrong with sex. There's nothing wrong with, being sexual. But, if you have especially Venus square Pluto or something like that, sometimes these are people who is like, you can't get enough. So no matter how many nuts you bust, how many people you have sex with, there's always going to be the void there. Even if you're in an actual relationship, fucking each other's brains out for breakfast, lunch, and dinner is not going to erase the problems that exist in a relationship. These are people who can use sex even like as a manipulation tool in relationships, or maybe you find other people do that to you. But it's like sex is always a very present theme, and it can play a very unhealthy role in your engagements with people if you don't do the proper work. So a huge sense of promiscuity could befall those with these aspects. And as always, I encourage, even though I'm very much pro-hoe and go for what you know, I'm also pro knowing why you doing what you doing, and so that you can, get the most out of it and not the lesser. And if you are deeply traumatized, which with Venus, Pluto, the chances and the odds of you coming from trauma bonds, experiencing trauma bonds, and being highly and deeply traumatized to the point where it's affecting, once again, your self-worth, your self-value, it's high. So just make sure you're understanding that part of yourself as well. And then my final piece of advice that I'll end on, even though I really can make this video like 2 hours long, but my final piece of advice I'm going to end on is wrap it up, since we're talking about hunching. And of course, this is advice that could apply to anybody. I know you could be like, Megan, anybody need to wrap it up. Everybody need to wrap it up. Anybody can catch sexually transmitted disease, infection, anything of that nature. That's very common. But because Pluto does directly deal with microorganisms, bacteria, infections, a lot of my Venus Pluto girlies are highly susceptible. Is it acceptable? Susceptible. I'm sorry, y'all. Way more susceptible to these types of situations. Catching something that your ass can't get rid of is very Venus Pluto. And that's another reason why you got to take your time and be very mindful of who you're dealing with. Okay. I've had so many clients who've contracted certain things, or even if it's not even like a disease. For instance, if you're a woman with Venus, especially like square Pluto, very easy for you to deal with a man who could even just throw off your microbiomes, and now you got all kind of, BV, and you just be careful, pay extra close attention to stuff like that. Yeah, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. So I'm going to go ahead and end this video on that note. Let me know what y'all think in the comment section. What has been your experience? If you are somebody who has Venus square, opposing, or even conjoined to Pluto, do you know anybody with these set of aspects? And make sure you practice unconditional self-love so that you can love others. And I'll catch y'all in the next video. Bye.